Printer can print up to 10 lines per second.
Welcome home, Columbia. Beautiful, beautiful.
This printer can print up to 10 lines per second. This printer can print up to 10 lines per second.
Welcome to lesson 34. I'm calling this Trig Oscillator, and Trig stands for trigonometry. If you've learned a little bit about trigonometry, this shouldn't be too difficult to understand. If you've never learned anything about trigonometry, but you're interested in mathematics, I encourage you to Google trigonometry cosine or trigonometry unit circle and study that before you view this video. If you are not interested in that trigonometry, then you might want to skip this video and go on to the next one. Okay, so with that, and by the way, if you've looked at all my videos so far and you're here on the 34th lesson, then congratulations. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of time, and hopefully you've learned a lot, but it shows a commitment, and congratulations for that. Okay, so Trig oscillator looks like this. So what we have is a rectangle, which is a div, and it is changing size depending on its location. And then we have some numbers there. That's X position. That's what that stands for. And that is showing you the pixel position. So it's oscillating between 100 and 0. So there goes down to 0. Now it's going up to 100. And when it gets to 100, it'll start declining. Okay? So it's oscillating between 0 and 100. Now 100, the X position stands for the left side of the rectangle. So when it gets to 100, that means this is 100 pixels from the edge. Okay? So the code looks like this, and we are going to write this oscillate position function. And so what I want you to do is go ahead and copy this code, no styling, no CSS. Well, we're going to write the CSS in the JavaScript. So we just have one paragraph tag here, and then a couple variables, and then we're creating the div on the fly, and we're writing the CSS right from the JavaScript. So go ahead and copy that, and when we come back, we'll write the oscillate position function. Okay, so we need to use some JavaScript math functions. So we're going to change the X position with some trig functions. So X position will equal math dot cos, stands for cosine, and we need to give that radians. And I'm going to multiply that times 100. I'll tell you why in a second. Okay, so what I like to do is start with something called the angle. You know, there's 360 degrees in an angle. So I'm incrementing the angle every time through it. We're going to be looping this oscillate position. And every time we start the oscillate position function, we'll be increasing the angle by 1. But we need to convert the angle to radians for our math cosine function, because the math cosine function doesn't take angle, it takes radians. So we say radians equals angle times math pi, dot pi, times 2. So that's 2 pi. That's math 2 pi divided by 360. That's the number of angles. If you if you've had trig, this will look pretty familiar. We're just converting angle to radians. I won't explain what a radian is, because if you haven't had trig, then it's a can of worms if I start just explaining what a radian is, because you have to really kind of understand the basics of trig. But I encourage you to look at that, to study that. Okay, so we have angle. We've converted the angle to radians. We put the radians in the cosine function, and that's going to be changing our x position. And by x position, I mean the location, the x location of the div on our web page. Okay, so with math cosine of radians will actually output negative numbers as well as positive numbers. But negative numbers, like a negative x position, is off the web page. In other words, we can't see it. If you give it a negative position, that means it's off the web page, because the edge of the web page is 0, x equals 0. So I'm going to use absolute value so that we don't end up with any negative numbers. So I'm going to take the absolute value of math.cosine radians. So math.abs, and then we will take the absolute value of this whole thing. Okay? So we're taking math cosine of radians. That gives us a number between 0 and, between -1 and 1. We're multiplying that times 100. So we will end up with a negative number there unless we take the absolute value of that. Okay? I hope that sounds right. Hope that makes sense to you. Okay, so then we need to actually change the div position, and we need the CSS to do that, or the style. So d style left equals x POS, and then we have to tell our code to include px. We have to tell our code that those are pixels. Okay, x position is a number, but it's we need to tell the style here that that's a pixels. That's a number. That's the number of pixels. Okay, I'm also going to do something a little fun here. I'm going to change the width of that div based on the x position as well. Instead of having a static width, it's going to change based on the x position. So it's really the same. Whoops, forgot the equal sign here. It's really the same as the code above. Okay? And then I'm going to output this x position. I'm calling that the data. I'm going to output that number into this paragraph tag we have. So, and that paragraph tag is called x pos data, standing for x position data. So x pos data dot inner text equals, and I'm going to put some text in there. space. And as you recall, the part here that's in quotes is actually literal text. And this part that isn't in quotes is the variable. It's the actual number that we're going to be outputting. And then we need to set timeout and call this oscillate position function over and over again with set timeout. Set timeout. And of course we can put any number we want in there. I'm going to put a low number, which is 50 milliseconds. Okay, so save that and open this code we just wrote. And there it is. So you see it changing positions, and you see the width changing as it changes position. So that variable x position is actually the location and it's the width. Okay? And that's about it for that. Let's look at it, the code, and see what we can change here, what we can experiment with. Okay, so what can you do with that? Well, you could change, we're changing the location, which is style left. We certainly could change style top. We're changing the width. We could change the height as well. We could change the color, maybe have an RGB color. The other thing I might experiment with is just making it look better, like making that paragraph tag look better with some CSS style. Okay, oh, also in set timeout, we have 50. That 50, probably change that to oscillation speed. You know, in other words, make it a variable and experiment with different numbers in there. 50, 100, 10, 1000, maybe change it real slow, like every second. Okay, hope you had fun with that. And if you didn't know anything about Trig, I hope you learned a little bit about Trig. And see you in lesson 35.